Welcome back. This is a very important topic for every pilot: weight and balance. And the reason it's so important for us is because when we're flying a plane, we're flying in three dimensions, unlike a car, which just travels in two. So, where you put the weight, not only how heavy the plane is, but where you put it, is equally as important. If you've already researched this topic a bit and you've come across words like moment, arm, and load, you'll have a very comprehensive idea of what they mean by the end of this guide. So, if the first introduction wasn't apparent enough, weight and balance is pinnacle of importance for pilots, and there are numerous accidents in history where people have lost their lives due to poor loading, whether that be not securing the weights in place or simply just getting the placement wrong. These are only four examples that I found. There are millions and millions of general aviation accidents that happen every year due to poor weight and balance. It's a topic that simply cannot be ignored. And so, the best way to visualize what's going on is to use a simple seesaw. You would have played on one as a kid, but it's so fundamental in understanding how to balance a plane. And from this image, it's pretty obvious why the seesaw is tilted toward the 100 kilo side, because it's much heavier than the 50 kilo weight. In fact, twice as heavy. But something strange happens when we move the weight. We don't change the weight, but we move it in. And the seesaw eventually becomes balanced perfectly. Nothing has changed except for the placement of the weight. So we'll explore why this happens and, more importantly, how we can use it to stay safe in the skies. So these are some terms that engineers, mathematicians, and physicists give to this diagram to make sense of it and to perform calculations on it much easier. So the middle white line at the pivot is called the datum or datum, and that just means reference point. That's all it is. It's the reference point for the arms. And the arm is not an arm on your body, it's the distance from the datum. That's all it is, distance from a reference point. So because our reference point is the pivot in the middle, the arm will be how far each weight is on either side from the middle. And as you can see here, they're both 2000 millimeters or 2 meters from the datum. So the arms for both of them are the same. The only thing that's different is the weight. Now, the reason I'm using millimeters is in metric weight and balance systems in aviation, kilogram millimeters is a unit for the moment. We'll get to that in the next slide, but yes, kilogram millimeters is pretty standard. Just to explain why the seesaw's tilted, the fact that we have a heavier weight, 100 kilos on the left, the fact that that creates a rotational force at the pivot, we call that force the moment or the load moment. And the way to calculate it is you multiply the arm, the distance from the datum, by the weight. And the result of that is the moment for that weight, not for the whole thing, just for that weight. So if we calculate the moment for both weights, so the moment here on the left for weight X would be, go back to our formula, weight times arm. So it would be 100 kilos times the arm of 2000 millimeters, and our moment would be 200,000 kilogram millimeters. That's the rotational force it creates on the left. On the right, it also creates a rotational force because it's arm times weight for weight Y, except its rotational force or moment is 50 times 2000, which is 100,000 kilogram millimeters, half of weight X. So that means the net moment, the final resultant moment, will be the larger moment, subtract the smaller moment, which is 100,000 kilogram millimeters on X's side. So that's why the seesaw tips towards X, the side of weight X. That's how we fundamentalize it in mathematics. So it's probably starting to make sense now why, when we move the heavier weight closer into the datum, the seesaw's balanced. All we're doing is reducing the arm of the heavy weight. And because we reduce the arm, we make the moment it produces less. Another thing you could do is also reduce the weight, because remember, moment is weight times arm, and reducing either of them will reduce the moment. But let's say we couldn't reduce the weight, all we would have to do is reduce the arm, which is exactly what we've done here. And then if you multiply both of these together again, they end up being exactly the same. So the net moment is 0 and the seesaw stays balanced. This is not just evident in seesaws or in aviation. There are so many examples of this in real life. For example, if you're a cricket fan or a baseball fan, especially if you watch the shorter formats like T20, towards the end of an innings, you'll see the batsman hold the bat high up in the handle. Now what he's doing here is essentially making the bat longer. I say that quote unquote longer because he's not actually making the bat longer, but he's making the arm from the ball to his hands longer. Now you could say to the batsman, look, I need you to hit it far. You need to hit it further. Either he can try and hit the ball harder literally, or if he doesn't have the strength to do that, there's no problem there. Because if he holds the bat really high up the handle, gives himself the biggest distance from the ball he can, the arm from his hands to the ball, with his hands being the datum, is longer, and with the same strength he could hit it further. Another example, one that gets used a lot, is doors. Now, literally, if you're standing near a door right now, open it first, push it from the handle as you normally would, feel how easy it is, open it back again. Now try to use the same force you did to close it, but move closer to the hinges and see how much harder it is. And you know the reason it's harder is because you're once again closer to the datum, which is a hinge, so your arm is less and your moment will be less. One more example, no surprise, is in aviation. Especially if you look at the tail plane of airplanes, there's a reason they're so far back, because the further back they are, the longer their arm is from the center of gravity and the more rotation they're capable of. Now obviously there's a limit to all of this, but aircraft manufacturers have perfected the physics of this, and the tail plane, that's why the wing surfaces are not as big as the main wings. You don't need huge wings. They're already really far back and their moment will be bigger. So this brings us to the airplane that we fly, for example, a Cessna. We achieve stable flight by keeping the center of gravity in a specific limit. If we imagine the plane as being part of a seesaw, you will create really, really undesirable forces. And the reason the seesaw is measured from the front of the plane and not from the center of gravity is because the center of gravity actually moves during flight because we burn fuel. So it's very important then to calculate how the center of gravity changes throughout the flight as we burn fuel and make sure it's always in the limit. Otherwise, we're going to have problems. The good thing is we can manipulate not only how heavy the weight we carry is, but also where the weight is placed. Because remember, if we move the weight closer to the datum, we can change its moment without having to take off anything. This is so useful because if you have a heavier passenger, it would make more sense to put him at the front where his arm from the datum is less, rather than right at the back where the arm is more and the moment is more. This stuff will be elaborated on in another video where we learn how to take all of this theory onto paper and actually make sure we're safe using loading charts and envelopes. That was part 1 of Casa Weight and Balance. Part 2 will go in depth in how to do these charts, very important for your written exams, but also on a day-to-day basis to make sure your flying is safe. That will be part 2. Anyway, stay safe in the skies. My name is Rashil. I hope you enjoyed.